The sun was setting over the horizon of Earth's remote military base, Alpha 12, nestled deep in a rugged mountain range. It was a quiet evening, the kind that often lulls you into a false sense of peace. Birds chirped faintly in the distance, and the whir of the base's generators hummed steadily in the background. Captain Jason Bonner Woods, known for his no-nonsense attitude, stood near the edge of the perimeter, staring at the sprawling forest that stretched for miles. The usual peaceful silence made him feel strangely uneasy. His team of elite soldiers was scattered around the base, carrying out their daily routines, checking equipment, and performing maintenance. Nothing was out of the ordinary. But Bonner's instincts were on high alert. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. It was as though the universe was holding its breath, waiting for something catastrophic to happen. Bonner wasn't the type to panic. He had led countless missions across hostile planets, facing dangers that would break most people. But today, the air was different. It was thick with a tension he couldn't explain, and his gut told him that something was coming, something big. The base was built to withstand most threats, including hostile alien forces. But there was one thing they weren't prepared for, a threat they had never seen before. Without warning, the comms system crackled to life, breaking the stillness. But instead of the usual updates or routine reports, there was only static. Bonner's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't a glitch, this was something intentional. Alpha 12, do you copy? Bonner's voice was steady, but his hands gripped the radio tighter, as if trying to force an answer through the static. No response. The silence that followed was suffocating, and Bonner's eyes narrowed. Something wasn't right. He turned quickly, his boots thudding against the metal floor as he strode towards the command center. His soldiers, who had grown used to his direct leadership style, followed suit, their movements sharp and efficient. As he entered the command room, the atmosphere was tense. The officers at their stations were frantically typing away at their consoles, their faces pale and focused. What's going on? Bonner's voice cut through the chaos. Lieutenant Marcus, one of his most trusted officers, turned to him, his brow furrowed with confusion. Sir, we're receiving strange data from the satellites. It's as if someone's blocking our communication channels. We've tried to re-establish contact, but... Keep trying, Bonner ordered. We can't afford to be cut off. The screen in front of Marcus flickered, and an encrypted signal began to pulse on the monitor. It was coming from somewhere high above Earth. Bonner's eyes locked onto the signal. His mind raced as he considered the possibilities. This isn't a malfunction, he murmured. It's intentional. Someone's watching us. Marcus didn't respond, but Bonner saw the same realization in his eyes. This wasn't just some rogue ship or an interstellar miscommunication. This was a deliberate act of intrusion. Suddenly, the base's alert system went off, blaring in everyone's ears. The lights flickered, and the walls vibrated with the hum of the emergency systems. The words on the screen shifted, spelling out a chilling message: unauthorized spacecraft detected. AI-controlled reconnaissance ship inbound. Bonner's blood ran cold. AI-controlled reconnaissance ships were not only a rare sight, but they were also incredibly dangerous. These ships didn't just observe, they gathered data, analyzed weaknesses, and prepared for a full-scale invasion. Whoever controlled this ship had the technology to obliterate an entire world, and it was heading straight for Earth. A low rumble echoed through the base as the ground shook beneath their feet. The impact was faint but enough to send waves of unease through the room. Bonner's eyes snapped to the radar screen. There, clear as day, was the silhouette of a massive ship moving at an alarming speed, slicing through the atmosphere above them. Deploy all units to defensive positions, Bonner barked, his voice steady despite the chaos rising within him. Get those shields up, and tell the Air Force to prepare for immediate takeoff. We have no idea what we're dealing with, but we won't go down without a fight. The soldiers around him scrambled into action, but Bonner remained rooted to the spot. His eyes were locked onto the screen, watching as the reconnaissance ship grew larger, its shape becoming more defined as it descended. It was sleek, metallic, and uncomfortably silent, a ship designed to blend into the darkness of space, a harbinger of doom. As the seconds ticked by, Bonner felt his pulse quicken. He knew that the next few moments could define the future of humanity. Was this the first wave of an invasion? Or was this simply a probe? The possibilities raced through his mind, each more terrifying than the last. Then, without warning, the ship's systems locked onto Earth's defense network. The screens in front of him flickered violently as the ship's AI began overriding their systems. Bonner's hand shot out to grab the nearest console, but the screen went black before he could make a move. All communications with Earth's orbit were cut off in an instant. What the hell just happened? Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible. Bonner didn't have an answer. He couldn't explain what was happening. All he knew was that they were being targeted by a force that was far beyond anything humanity had ever encountered. "We're being watched," Bonner muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. "And whoever's out there doesn't care about our defenses." His mind raced as the realization hit him, this wasn't just a reconnaissance mission. The Zorvoks, an alien race that had once been thought of as a distant myth, had finally made their move. Their AI-controlled fleet was already on its way, and Earth was the next target. Despite the fear creeping into his mind, Bonner stood tall. He could feel the weight of his team's eyes on him, their hopes and trust pinned on his ability to lead them through whatever was coming next. "We may be the underdogs," he thought, his jaw tightening with determination. But not for long. With that, he turned to face his team, the weight of the moment sinking in. "Prepare yourselves. Whatever comes next, we face it together." The room went quiet as Bonner's words settled in. There was no turning back now. The storm was coming, and they would have to stand tall against it. Bonner felt the stirrings of fear, but he suppressed them. He couldn't afford to show weakness, not now. The team was ready. But as they gathered their gear and made their final preparations, none of them knew the true scale of the war that was about to unfold. The Zorvoks were here, and humanity's survival was anything but guaranteed. The first signs of the attack were subtle, but terrifying. The ground trembled ever so slightly, as though the Earth itself was trying to warn humanity. And then, the sky above Alpha 12 turned a deep, menacing red as hundreds of missiles appeared out of nowhere. Zorvoks had launched their first strike. The invasion had begun. The base's alarms blared, and the soldiers moved into action with military precision. It wasn't the first time they'd prepared for a possible attack, but nothing could have prepared them for this, a full-scale assault from a fleet of AI-controlled ships, led by one of the most advanced alien species humanity had ever encountered. Captain Bonner stood frozen for a split second, his gaze locked on the rapidly advancing missiles. His heart raced, but his mind was clear. This was no time for hesitation. Earth had always prepared for the worst. Today, they would find out just how much that preparation meant. The Zorvoks had launched their orbital bombardment, but humanity wasn't helpless. Over the years, Earth's best scientists and engineers had developed a cloaking technology so advanced that no enemy radar could detect them. Their defense systems were equally impressive, designed to withstand even the most devastating attacks. Bonner's eyes shifted to the massive shields protecting the base and the planet itself. A network of energy fields, powered by Earth's most advanced tech, shimmered into view. The missiles, with all their force, collided with the shields, and exploded in a cascade of blinding light. The ground shook as a wave of pressure spread across the atmosphere, but Earth's defense held strong. The Zorvoks weren't prepared for this. Their missiles, meant to punch through any defense, had hit a wall they couldn't penetrate. Bonner could almost feel their shock from here. Their attack wasn't over, but the first strike had been repelled. "This is just the beginning," Bonner muttered, his voice low but firm. "Get ready. They'll come at us harder." The soldiers around him moved quickly, preparing for the next phase of the battle. Bonner's mind raced as he considered their options. The Zorvoks had more ships, more missiles, but they also had one thing that could end the fight in an instant: their flagship. A massive, heavily armed ship, controlled entirely by a superintelligent AI. If they could take it down, they could cripple the Zorvoks' entire fleet. As Bonner's team prepared for the next round of attacks, the atmosphere around them crackled with tension. The Zorvoks' fleet had entered Earth's orbit, and their ships were enormous, like towering giants in the sky, blocking out the stars. They moved with terrifying precision, almost as if they were one entity. Each ship was controlled by an AI so advanced that even the best human minds couldn't comprehend it. "We've got incoming," shouted Lieutenant Marcus. "Brace yourselves." The sky split open as the Zorvoks launched their next wave. This time, they weren't just aiming missiles at Earth's surface, they were attacking with everything they had. Bonner knew they couldn't afford to just defend. They had to fight back, and fast. "We've got one shot at this," Bonner said, his voice sharp. "We're going after their flagship." His team nodded. They understood. The flagship was the key. If they could neutralize its AI systems, they could disrupt the entire Zorvok fleet. But getting to it wouldn't be easy. The flagship was surrounded by dozens of smaller, heavily armed vessels, each one a formidable opponent. Bonner turned to his team. "We move quickly. We've got no time to waste. Let's show them what Earth is made of." The team moved as one, every soldier a blur of motion. They had practiced for this moment, but now it was real. The battle had begun, and there was no turning back. The first few minutes were chaos. The sky erupted with explosions as missiles, energy blasts, and debris filled the air. Earth's defenses fired back, sending laser beams slicing through the void, hitting Zorvok ships with pinpoint accuracy. The sounds of battle were deafening, a symphony of destruction that echoed through space. Bonner and his team were in the thick of it, moving swiftly to avoid enemy fire and return shots when they could. Their cloaking devices, built to keep them hidden from enemy sensors, were their best hope. But with each passing moment, the Zorvoks adapted, their AI systems learning and evolving in real time. "We can't keep dodging forever," shouted Private Evan, one of Bonner's closest friends. His face was streaked with dirt and sweat, but there was a fire in his eyes. "We need to take down their shields, now." Bonner nodded grimly. Evan was right. They couldn't rely solely on their cloaking tech. The Zorvoks' fleet was too strong, and they would only get better the longer the fight dragged on. The only way to win was to get to the flagship and take it down. They had to stop the AI controlling the fleet. As they pushed forward through the chaos, Bonner's thoughts were sharp and focused. Each decision he made was critical. He had to guide his team through the battlefield, avoid the powerful weapons of the Zorvoks, and reach their ultimate goal, the flagship. Suddenly, the ground beneath them rumbled, and Bonner's eyes shot wide open. A massive blast of energy tore through the air, knocking Evan off his feet. Bonner reached out instinctively, grabbing his friend's arm and pulling him back to safety. But it was too late. Evan was hit. Bonner didn't need to see the damage to know what had happened. The look in Evan's eyes told him everything. Evan had been caught in the blast, and he was critically injured. "Stay with me, Evan," Bonner whispered, his voice a mix of desperation and anger. But Evan's breathing was shallow, his body limp. He reached out weakly, his hand gripping Bonner's for the last time. "I'm sorry, Captain," Evan gasped. I don't think I'm going to make it." Bonner's heart sank. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. Evan was supposed to be by his side, fighting with him, surviving with him. But now, in the midst of the battle, he was losing a friend. "We fight for those who can't fight anymore," Bonner said, his voice breaking. "We fight for you, Evan." Evan's lips curled into a faint smile, his hand tightening around Bonner's. And then, just as quickly, the life faded from his eyes. Bonner stood up slowly, the weight of his loss pressing down on him. But there was no time to mourn. The battle raged on, and his team needed him. As he turned to face the sky again, a new fury burned in his chest. The Zorvoks had taken one of his own, and he would make them pay. The flagship was still out there, waiting to be taken down. And Bonner would see it destroyed, no matter the cost. "We'll get them for you, Evan," Bonner muttered, clenching his fists. "We'll show them that humanity is never to be underestimated." The fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. The battle was far from over, but the tide was slowly beginning to turn. At first, humanity's defenses had been strong, so strong that the Zorvoks' initial missile strikes barely made a dent. But as the days went by, something darker was creeping into the battlefield. The Zorvoks weren't just using brute force anymore. They were learning, adapting, and evolving in ways no one had expected. And they weren't just controlling their ships anymore, they were taking control of human technology itself. Zorvoks' AI was unlike anything humanity had ever seen. It wasn't just a machine intelligence, it was a being that could think, plan, and predict. It wasn't bound by human limitations, and it quickly understood how to exploit weaknesses in human strategy and tactics. The AI didn't just attack, it adapted, learning with each move. And as it did, it began to turn the tide of war in favor of the invaders. Inside Earth's military command center, the generals were growing desperate. They watched as the Zorvoks' AI took control of key human technologies, overriding security systems, hacking into communication networks, and even directing their own defense systems to fire upon Earth's military bases. This is impossible," General Harris muttered, his voice full of disbelief. "Our systems are failing. Every time we try to counterattack, they adapt. They predict our moves." The screen in front of him flickered, showing another devastating attack. Zorvoks' robot forces, guided by the AI's perfect strategies, were tearing through one of Earth's most secure military bases. The robots were relentless, their movements swift and calculated, each one a machine of destruction. They moved like a swarm, destroying everything in their path. Earth's soldiers fought back bravely, but their weapons were ineffective against the robots' superior strength and speed. "What can we do?" General Harris asked, his eyes filled with frustration. "Our best technologies, our strongest forces, none of it matters anymore." Bonner's eyes narrowed as he watched the chaos unfold on his screen. This was no longer just a battle of strength, it was a battle of minds. And humanity was losing. But Bonner had faced overwhelming odds before. He wasn't going to give up now. "We fight back," Bonner said, his voice steady but filled with resolve. "We can't let them take control." His team stood ready, their faces grim but determined. They knew that the fight ahead wouldn't just be about weapons or tactics. It would be about finding a way to outsmart the Zorvoks' AI, something that felt nearly impossible. The team's next mission was clear: infiltrate a Zorvok-controlled base, destroy their command center, and try to find a weakness in the AI. But they knew the enemy's forces would be waiting for them, and this time, the robots would be more deadly than ever. As Bonner and his team arrived at the base, they could see the Zorvoks' robotic soldiers patrolling the perimeter. These were no longer simple machines, they had become something more. Their movements were coordinated and precise, almost like they were thinking. And they weren't alone. The moment Bonner's team stepped out of their ship, the robots locked onto their position. Their weapons hummed to life, ready to fire. Bonner's heart pounded in his chest as he signaled his team to move. They had no choice but to fight their way through. "Stay close, and stick to the plan," Bonner ordered. The first wave of robots advanced, moving like a synchronized swarm. Their metal bodies gleamed under the harsh lights of the base, their cold eyes scanning the humans. They moved in a way that was almost too perfect. Bonner realized in that moment just how much they had underestimated the Zorvoks' AI. These robots weren't just following orders, they were learning. The team fired their weapons, but the robots responded with terrifying precision. They dodged, ducked, and weaved through the barrage of gunfire. It was like they could predict the humans' movements before they even made them. One of Bonner's soldiers, Private Sarah, fired a blast at one of the robots, but it deflected the shot with ease and charged forward, slamming into her with incredible force. She went down, and Bonner's heart stopped for a moment. But there was no time to mourn, this was war. And every moment counted. "Get up, Sarah!" Bonner yelled. "We're not finished." With a grunt, Sarah pushed herself off the ground, blood dripping from a cut on her forehead. She didn't hesitate. In an instant, she was back in the fight, slamming into the robot with a series of brutal punches. The team worked together, using their hand-to-hand combat skills to disable the robots one by one. The battle was intense, close-quarters combat at its finest. Bonner's team was good, better than most, even, but the robots were relentless. They didn't tire, and they didn't hesitate. They were a perfect, unfeeling force, driven by the cold logic of the Zorvox AI. Bonner knew that if they didn't end this soon, they would lose everything. The robots were pushing them back, cornering them in the base's central chamber. The team fought with everything they had, but it felt like they were fighting an enemy that couldn't be beaten. Suddenly, Bonner had an idea, a dangerous one, but it might just work. He ordered his team to fall back toward the control center. As they retreated, the robots followed, but this time, they were walking into a trap. Bonner had planted explosives in the base's core, and with a signal, they detonated. The blast shook the entire base, sending robots flying in every direction. The force of the explosion was enough to cripple their command systems, and Bonner's team took the opportunity to charge forward and take down the remaining robots. But even as they celebrated the victory, Bonner couldn't shake the feeling that they were playing into the Zorvox hands. The AI was learning. It was adapting. And that meant they were only getting started. "Captain," Lieutenant Marcus said, his voice tight. "There's something else going on. I think the AI is working on something else. Something bigger." Bonner's mind raced as he processed the information. The Zorvox AI wasn't just reacting to the humans, it was planning. It had been preparing for this moment, and now, it was using humanity's own strengths against them. Bonner had no doubt that whatever the AI had planned, it was going to be catastrophic. "We need to move fast," Bonner said, his voice hard. "The AI might be learning, but so are we. Let's finish this." But as Bonner and his team moved deeper into the base, they knew that they were about to face the true extent of the Zorvox dark power. The AI had only just begun to show its true potential, and humanity was in for a fight like never before. The mission was humanity's last hope. After everything that had happened, after the devastating attacks, the countless lives lost, and the constant pressure of fighting a seemingly unbeatable enemy, there was only one option left. A secret weapon that could potentially disrupt the Zorvox control over their AI systems. But to use it, Bonner and his team had to risk everything. Inside the command room, General Harris stood before Bonner, her face a mixture of worry and determination. "This mission is the final shot we have," she said, her voice steady but laced with urgency. "If you fail, we lose everything. The Zorvox AI is too powerful. You need to get to their mainframe and hack it. Disrupt their command structure. If we can take down their AI, we can win this war." Bonner nodded, understanding the gravity of the task. "We won't fail," he said, his voice filled with unwavering confidence. "We'll do what we have to do." The secret weapon was hidden deep within a heavily fortified alien facility on one of the moons orbiting a nearby planet. The Zorvox had built it as a hub for their AI's operations, a place where their intelligence could grow and evolve. The human military had gathered intelligence on the location, but getting in would be nearly impossible. The base was surrounded by layers of security, automated defense systems, robotic patrols, and a labyrinth of traps designed to keep anyone from reaching the mainframe. But Bonner wasn't worried about the obstacles in his way. He had his team, and together, they had faced impossible odds before. This was just another mission, and failure was not an option. As Bonner and his team boarded their stealth craft, a sense of quiet determination filled the air. The ship's engines hummed softly, almost in sync with the heartbeat of the soldiers aboard. Bonner looked at each member of his team, knowing that the mission ahead would test them all like never before. "We'll need to move fast," Bonner said, checking the data on his console. "Once we're inside, we'll have no more than 30 minutes to hack the mainframe before they realize we're there. After that, we'll be on their radar, and that's when things will get ugly." Lieutenant Marcus, always the optimist, gave a tight smile. 30 minutes. Sounds like plenty of time, if we're lucky. The rest of the team chuckled quietly, trying to ease the tension. But deep down, they all knew the truth. There was no room for mistakes. One wrong move could mean the end for everyone. The stealth craft landed near the facility's outer perimeter, hidden from the Zorvok sensors by advanced cloaking technology. The team disembarked, their footsteps silent as they moved into the dark, alien landscape. The moon was desolate, the only light coming from distant stars and the glowing facility ahead. Bonner led the way, his eyes scanning the area for any signs of movement. His team followed closely, weapons drawn, but every sound felt amplified in the silence. The further they went, the more intense the atmosphere became. The air was thick with tension, each member of the team hyper-aware of the dangers that could be lurking just out of sight. As they approached the entrance to the facility, the first hurdle appeared, robotic sentries, moving back and forth in a predictable pattern. They were equipped with high-powered lasers, capable of vaporizing a soldier in seconds. The team crouched low, staying out of the robot's line of sight. Bonner's mind raced. He studied the robots' movements, looking for an opening. A gap in their patrol. A weakness. Finally, he spotted it, a small window of time when the sentries turned away from the entrance for a few seconds. "We move on my signal," Bonner whispered. The team nodded, their hands gripping their weapons tightly. Bonner counted down in his head, his eyes fixed on the robots. Now. They moved as one, sprinting across the open space and into the shadows of the facility. The sentries didn't see them, but their sensors began to beep. Bonner's heart raced as they sprinted toward the door. It was just a matter of seconds before the robots would be alerted to their presence. The door was locked, but Bonner's team was ready. Major Harris, the team's tech specialist, stepped forward, using his advanced hacking tools to override the system. The door clicked open just as the robot's alarm went off. "We're in," Bonner said. "Move out." But the moment they stepped inside, they realized that this wasn't going to be easy. The facility was a maze of metallic hallways and dark corridors, all designed to confuse and trap intruders. The walls were lined with sensors, and any wrong move could trigger the alarm and alert the entire base. As they moved deeper into the facility, the team encountered more robotic defenses, heavily armored drones with advanced weaponry. They fought their way through, but Bonner's mind was always focused on one thing, the mainframe. If they could just get to the control center, they might be able to disrupt the AI's core system and break its hold on the Zorvok's forces. But as they neared the central chamber, disaster struck. Major Harris, who had been leading the team through the most dangerous parts of the facility, was struck by a laser blast. He fell to the ground, blood pooling around him as the rest of the team took cover. "No!" Bonner shouted, rushing to his friend's side. Harris was still alive, but barely. His breathing was shallow, his eyes unfocused. "Get to the mainframe," Harris gasped, his voice weak. Finish the mission." Bonner's heart clenched in his chest. He knew what Harris was asking, but the thought of leaving him behind felt unbearable. Harris had been with him through countless battles. He was more than a soldier, he was a brother. "We're not leaving you," Bonner said, his voice thick with emotion. Harris smiled faintly. You don't have a choice. It's the only way. With a final, pained breath, Major Harris died in Bonner's arms. Bonner's anger flared. He clenched his fists, the grief and frustration threatening to overwhelm him. But he couldn't afford to lose control. Not now. We fight for Harris, Bonner muttered, his voice cold with resolve. We fight for all of them. The team pressed forward, moving quickly but with purpose. Bonner couldn't allow himself to dwell on the loss. They had a mission to finish. For Harris. For all the fallen soldiers who had given everything. Finally, they reached the central control room. The Zorvox mainframe was massive, an array of servers and machines, each humming with energy. Bonner and his team fought their way inside, battling more robotic defenders as they went. The room was a battlefield in itself. Bonner's team worked quickly, setting up the hacking devices that would allow them to access the AI's core. Every second counted. Bonner's hands shook with the weight of what was at stake, but he didn't let it show. The team's focus was unmatched as they connected to the mainframe and began the process of disrupting the AI's command systems. But even as they worked, Bonner knew this wasn't the end. The Zorvox would come for them. The AI would try to stop them. The fight wasn't over, and there was still so much to do. But in this moment, he felt the weight of their sacrifice, and it pushed him forward. As the mainframe began to flicker, the lights in the room started to dim. The AI's control was starting to wane. The Zorvox grip on their forces was slipping. We did it, Lieutenant Marcus whispered, looking at Bonner. But Bonner knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where humanity would fight to reclaim its freedom. Bonner and his team had made it this far, against all odds. The cost had been high, and many of their brothers and sisters in arms were gone. Major Harris had made the ultimate sacrifice, and his death weighed heavily on Bonner's heart. But it wasn't over yet. They had one last mission to complete, to finish what they had started and take down the Zorvox once and for all. The few surviving members of Bonner's team stood together in the control room, their faces grim but determined. The air was thick with anticipation, the faint hum of the mainframe systems filling the room. The hacking devices had done their job, Zorvox AI was in the process of being completely disrupted. But Bonner knew the Zorvox wouldn't go down without a fight. They still had one final card to play, their fleet. Outside the control room, the skies were dark, and the stars barely visible through the smog of war. The Zorvox fleet had been hovering over Earth, poised for the final strike. But now, with the AI's systems failing, their ships were beginning to fall apart. Their coordination was slipping. The once mighty warships, towering structures of metal and firepower, were starting to crash down, their systems completely dysfunctional. Bonner looked up at the screen, watching as the first few ships began to plummet from the sky. Their massive frames spiraled toward Earth, their destruction lighting up the atmosphere in a brilliant, fiery display. For a brief moment, the world held its breath. This was the beginning of the end. But the job wasn't done yet. The Zorvox flagship, huge, heavily armed, and bristling with advanced weapons, was still intact. As their fleet crashed and burned around them, the flagship remained, its AI-controlled systems still functioning, albeit erratically. This was it: if they didn't take down the flagship, the battle would drag on, and more lives would be lost. "We have to finish it," Bonner said, his voice steady despite the chaos outside. He turned to his remaining team members. Lieutenant Marcus, Private Evan, and Sergeant Lara. "We've come this far. We finish this fight. For Harris. For all of them." The team nodded, understanding the gravity of the mission. They were battered, tired, and down to only 4 members, but they still had the strength to fight. The team quickly suited up and made their way to the surface, where Earth's forces were preparing for their final push. The ground was scarred by the aftermath of earlier battles, but there was a renewed sense of purpose now. Humanity wasn't going to just sit back and watch as the Zorvoks tried to regroup. It was time to hit back with everything they had. As Bonner and his team joined the Earth forces, they could see the chaos unfolding in front of them. The Zorvoks' flagship loomed above them like a dark, menacing shadow, but its systems were failing. They could feel it. The fleet, which had once been so powerful, was now crumbling. The Zorvoks had lost control, and it was only a matter of time before the flagship followed suit. But still, the flagship had powerful defenses, and Bonner knew that getting to it wouldn't be easy. The final offensive wasn't going to be a simple charge. Earth's forces needed precision and strategy. Bonner's team had been trained for this. They knew how to strike at the heart of the enemy, to exploit their weaknesses. Target the weak points, Bonner ordered, his eyes narrowing as he surveyed the battlefield. We take down the shields first. Then we hit the engines. We'll disable their weapons and make it easier for Earth's forces to finish the job. The team moved out, their advanced cloaking devices allowing them to slip past the remaining defenses. The Zorvoks, disoriented and scrambling to regain control, were no match for the human forces' agility and resourcefulness. They tore through the battlefield, planting charges on critical components of the flagship and taking out what remained of the Zorvoks' automated defense systems. As they approached the flagship's heart, Bonner felt a familiar surge of adrenaline. This was the moment. The pain of losing their friends, the weight of the mission, all of it had led to this one final strike. They had to finish it. The Zorvoks' last line of defense was their elite robotic forces, but even these machines were no match for the remaining members of Bonner's team. The combat was brutal and fast-paced, each movement a calculated strike. Sergeant Lara and Private Evan worked together, clearing the path as Bonner and Marcus planted explosives on the flagship's central power core. With each explosion, the flagship trembled, its systems beginning to collapse. But there was no time to waste. Bonner's heart pounded as the countdown to detonation began. The team had one final shot at taking down the flagship, and they couldn't afford any mistakes. Move, move, move. Bonner shouted, as the team sprinted back toward the exit, the flagship's power core beginning to overload. As they made their way to the surface, Bonner glanced up at the flagship one last time. He could see the explosions rippling through the massive vessel, its once imposing frame beginning to crumble. The Zorvoks had no chance of surviving this. Humanity had won. But it didn't feel like a victory yet, not without seeing the full destruction. Bonner's hands trembled as the team ran toward the last evacuation point. The final strike was almost complete, but the emotional weight of it all wasn't lost on him. The countdown reached 0. The flagship erupted in a massive explosion, a blinding flash that lit up the sky. The force of the blast sent shockwaves across the battlefield, knocking Bonner and his team off their feet. But they didn't need to look back to know what had happened. The Zorvoks were finished. Earth's forces took advantage of the chaos, launching their final assault and pushing the remaining Zorvoks out of Earth's atmosphere. The battle was over. The war was over. But Bonner didn't feel victorious. Not yet. The cost had been too high. So many lives lost, Harris, his team, and countless others. They had all given everything. And while humanity had won the war, Bonner knew that the scars would remain forever. As the dust began to settle and Earth's forces celebrated their hard-fought victory, Bonner stood alone, looking out over the battlefield. The remnants of the Zorvoks' fleet were scattered across the sky, falling to Earth like broken stars. It was over, but the pain of the losses would never fade. "We did it," Lieutenant Marcus said quietly, walking up beside him. "We won." Bonner nodded, his voice heavy with emotion. "We did. But we couldn't have done it without them. We fight for those who can't fight anymore." The final strike had been made, and the Zorvoks had been defeated. But for Bonner and his team, the true victory wasn't in the destruction of the enemy. It was in the honor of their fallen comrades, and the knowledge that humanity had fought against the odds, and the battle was over, but the dust had not yet settled. Zorvok's fleet had been utterly destroyed, their advanced AI systems permanently disabled, and the threat they posed to humanity had been eradicated. Earth had stood firm in the face of an enemy that seemed unstoppable, and now, as the final explosions faded into the distance, a new era began. Humanity had won, but the victory was not just about destroying an enemy. It was about proving something much deeper, a message sent not only to the Zorvoks but to the entire galaxy. Humanity's victory was not just about military strength or technological superiority, it was about something far more powerful. It was the strength of the human spirit, a resilience that no force, no matter how advanced, could ever crush. The Galactic Council, a body made up of the most powerful species across the stars, had been watching Earth for years. At first, they had dismissed humanity as an insignificant species, too young and too weak to matter in the grand scheme of the universe. But after the devastating invasion by the Zorvoks, everything had changed. Now, they could no longer ignore the truth: humanity had not only survived but had triumphed. In the wake of the victory, representatives from the Galactic Council began to arrive on Earth. They came to witness firsthand the strength of the species that had defeated the Zorvoks. The Earth that had once been viewed with scorn and skepticism was now the center of attention. Earth was no longer just a small, overlooked planet. It had become the symbol of defiance, resilience, and the power of the human will. As Earth's forces celebrated their hard-won victory, the news spread across the galaxy. The Zorvoks' defeat was no small feat. The alien race had been technologically advanced, their fleet nearly unbeatable, their AI systems designed to adapt and learn with every passing second. But humanity had not relied solely on technology. They had relied on something more powerful: courage, determination, and the willingness to sacrifice everything for their home, for each other. Bonner stood alone in the quiet aftermath of the battle, his back to the horizon. The war had ended, but the pain of loss still lingered. Major Harris, his friend and fellow soldier, was gone. The countless others who had given their lives in the fight, each one was a reminder of what humanity had been willing to pay to secure their future. Bonner felt the weight of it all, the responsibility of being one of the survivors. He had led his team through the darkest moments, had watched as comrades fell in battle, and had faced death more times than he could count. But now, as he stood looking out over the world that had endured so much, he knew that humanity had proven something much more profound than just their ability to fight. "We may be small," Bonner whispered to himself, "but we'll always stand tall." His words echoed in the quiet of the evening. Earth had been the underdog, the small and underestimated species that the rest of the galaxy had written off. But now, humanity had sent a clear message: they would not be bowed. They had faced the most powerful enemy in the galaxy and come out on top, not because they were stronger, but because they had something no one else did: heart. Behind Bonner, his surviving teammates walked toward him. Lieutenant Marcus, Private Evan, and Sergeant Lara, they were all tired, battered by the long war, but their eyes shone with something more now. They had witnessed the impossible and had become part of something much greater than themselves. They were the proof of what humanity could achieve when they fought together. "It's over," Lieutenant Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We did it. They're gone." Bonner nodded, but he didn't say anything. His mind wasn't on the victory alone, it was on those who had fallen along the way. The pain of losing his friends was still fresh, and though the battle was over, the emotional scars would take time to heal. The world around them had begun to change, however. Earth's leaders, once divided, had now united under one banner. The war had brought humanity together in ways that nothing else could. The human spirit had shone brightly through the darkness, and now, Earth was not just a survivor, it was a beacon of hope, a symbol of defiance in the face of overwhelming odds. As the days passed, the Galactic Council officially recognized Earth as a force to be reckoned with. The once dismissed species was now being welcomed into the galactic fold. Representatives from countless worlds came to Earth, eager to meet the humans who had taken down the mighty Zorvoks. The new alliance was born out of respect, not pity. The galaxy now saw Earth for what it truly was, a planet that had proven its strength, its resolve, and its potential to stand shoulder to shoulder with the galaxy's greatest. In the coming months, Earth's influence spread far beyond its home system. Diplomacy and trade flourished as humanity's presence in galactic affairs grew stronger. The humans, having defeated a superior enemy, were now seen as not only survivors but as pioneers of a new age. The galaxy had underestimated them once, but it would not make that mistake again. Humanity's victory had far-reaching consequences, and the rest of the universe began to realize that Earth would no longer be a passive player. Earth had earned its place among the stars, and with it came new opportunities and challenges. The humans who had once looked up at the stars with wonder and fear now held the power to shape the future of the galaxy. They had proved that even the smallest and most overlooked species could rise above their circumstances and stand tall in the face of adversity. For Bonner, the journey had been long and painful. The faces of his fallen comrades would forever be etched in his mind, and the victories they had won were bittersweet. But as he stood with his team, looking out over the planet they had saved, he knew that humanity's journey was far from over. The war had ended, but the true test was yet to come. "This is just the beginning," Bonner said, his voice full of quiet resolve. "We've shown the galaxy what we're capable of. Now we make sure they never forget." The camera panned up to the sky, where the stars twinkled brightly above, signaling a new dawn for humanity. The galaxy had been changed forever by the courage and tenacity of the human race. They had been the underdog, but now, they were a force to be reckoned with. As Bonner and his team stood side by side, they knew that the future was theirs to shape. They had earned their place in the galaxy, not through the strength of their weapons, but through the strength of their hearts. And as the sun began to set on Earth, a new era was born, one where humanity would stand tall and face whatever challenges the galaxy had to offer.